Hello, I'm Omar, and today my guest is the General Manager of Amazon, Omar Sahy.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Let's jump in and talk about Souq, Amazon. You were there in the thick of it as the transition happened. Try and remember back, Kiddo, when was the first time you heard about it? What were your initial reactions and how did it all play out?
Yes, to your point, I've been lucky enough to be part of that journey. When we started up Souq, when I joined late 2012, if we'd be, part of Amazon with Amazon Egypt, I would have said that's something we'd love to aspire to. But I joke around with my wife a lot and tell her, I feel that when I go to the life on Amazon afterwards, I have a notepad that I walk around with, and I feel like I'm a high school kid again, and it's quite refreshing in that sense. I guess we're just really lucky in the fact that you get to work with super smart people from all around the world that have seen different aspects. Everybody's kind of learning together. I think the different ways that the company operates also allows for a lot of open communication and what we call very scalable mechanisms, which are ways to essentially allow us to bring all those learnings that something that happened in Singapore, how can we understand how to avoid that or build on it, in Cairo or in Seattle the next minute or two. So I think that part's been super exciting for us.
An acquisition like that comes with a lot of change. What kind of challenges were faced internally in going from Souq to Amazon?
Well, I think building on that one part where you kind of realize that you have to build infrastructure proper. And these things take time sometimes, right? Back then it was the decision making was what seemed to us at the time as super fast. But then you kind of stop now and say, okay, well, what is this going to look like 20 years from now? But then when you kind of take a step back and say, okay, well, I got to raise capital and I have to grow accordingly. I have to do it by not growing on quicksand. I have to build sustainable businesses, and you want to focus a lot on your tech. You want to focus a lot on hiring the right people. That everything comes with a trade-off. Fast forward, to 2017, and we concluded and announced a transaction with Amazon. You have to slow down for a moment to actually make sure that you're kind of fundamentally doing all the digs required to have that infrastructure so you can take up to a skyscraper. So there was a few months where you're sitting there like, I need to run, and your teams are knocking on your door and saying like, we need to move faster. And I think that part was, took a bit of a toll. But then you realize a few months after, when you have that infrastructure, you're actually able to run a lot quicker. But that was a big learning for me personally and for many of us as a team, as part of that change management that we have to undergo.
You of course have, quite a deep history in e-commerce. How have you seen it change? Because now we're not talking about e-commerce, we're talking about Q-commerce.
I think the important part in whatever type of engagement, we look at e-commerce as part of commerce, right? Technology is going to continue to advance. Staying ahead and innovating is going to continue to be a requirement. But what's super important is understanding the three things that will not change, that everybody that's buying something, or actually more importantly, making a buying decision, is able to see, which is, I want to be able to find everything I'm looking for at the prices that make sense, at sharp, good prices, and it has to be very convenient for me. So really, as the evolution comes in, and if you ask me, where we were 10 years ago, would we have imagined we'd be here today, or 10 years from now? The answer is, as long as we focus on the basics, this will all make sense. Obviously, you're not going to have someone, wake up 20 years from now and say, I want to pay a little extra for a product. What venue or medium that's going to happen on, we don't know. But at the end, while we all see that e-commerce has obviously played a large part in the evolution, especially with the last few years, which I think, quite frankly, was a big responsibility on the industry as a whole, given where we were and how we had to build more convenient and safe environments for the communities that we serve. I still find it to be very, very much day one. So, you look at the role that e-commerce plays is important, but today we're still well within infancy stage. So I think there's so much still ahead of us, and we're probably still just getting started as an industry.
You're right, we are only getting started, but e-commerce stands as one of the more prolific sectors in Egypt and the Middle East, even in terms of funding. In terms of a company like Amazon, and there's more names entering, is it a case of the more the merrier, or does this pose a threat to Amazon?
No, I think it's probably on the former, because there's a lot of investments that you want to do to help the consumer make a good buying decision. If we focus only today that, our ads going to cost more, of course they will, but is that better for the industry? Absolutely it is. Now, if you're doing your job right and you're consistent and you're actually building trust, then things will work out quite well. But when you look at competition, I think it's quite an unfortunate logical fallacy that you see many companies kind of focus and say, competitor X is doing this or that. And I'm not going to say we don't look at our competitors, but we typically keep our competitors in our rear view mirror. But the second you take your eye off of the customers and serving the customers and delighting the customers, you start to innovate less. And the moment you innovate less, you're down the path of death for the company. So it really comes down to how can you continue to innovate, how you can continue to work backwards from your customer and just pay attention to the bigger picture. But as a whole, all these investments help us advance. They help, build better logistical and last mile networks, better payment and affordability options. So there's a lot around that ecosystem that becomes super important so we can actually delight our customers in things that are outside of, is this the right buying decision and am I comfortable to buy or not?
We often credit the pandemic as the great accelerator of e-commerce. Is that too simplistic a view?
Where e-commerce is today is inevitable. But I think we also, as an industry, had an important role to play in the times of the pandemic. I think it was quite critical to organize ourselves as an industry, and certainly we did that in Amazon by building our tenants, how we're going to operate. For us, when we built these tenants out, we said safety is going to be over business continuity. And business continuity will come hands in hands with delighting our customers. So we actually paused on that growth, if you will, to make sure that we're able to do it in a safe environment. So, how did we essentially reshuffle our fulfillment centers to accommodate social distancing? And we actually deployed a little over 300 different measures that were safety related. How do you operate in a predominantly cash on demand or a delivery environment by entering into multiple partnerships that help incentivize ePay and kind of build that mind shift, if you will. So I think it was quite important for us to make those investments. And when you do that, and again, you have that infrastructure that you're able to serve at scale, then you go. But if you ask me, I would say it's inevitable. It's just a question of timing. But I think that important role was quite critical for e-commerce to play at the time and will continue to play. If you do it right and you build on trust, the customers will stay. The problem is, if you think short term over long term value creation, then when things hopefully go back to normal, and you've abused that, customers won't trust you. So it really becomes how do you think kind of long term over short term gain?
As we were saying, e-commerce is kind of evolving rapidly, and like I say, now Q-commerce is kind of what people are talking about. Drawing on your kind of experience in e-commerce, what's the kind of the next big evolution? Where can e-commerce innovate kind of within it as a sector?
I think when you ask me on commerce in general, I think the ecosystem around it is super important, that it continues to grow at the same pace, if not quicker. And a part that I find super intriguing is infrastructure, logistics, the last mile networks, middle mile. I mean, these aspects are the fundamentals, if you will. What may seem non-sexy at times, but is critical so we're actually able to deliver and delight our customers. If I were to take a snap at what in this region, particularly in Egypt, I'm extremely intrigued by payments. I think, how do we solve on affordability, especially with what we've been encountering, whether it's devaluation, inflation, and kind of the hardships that we've been as a community undergoing. It becomes super, super important to really solve the elements around it more than the direct elements. So, short answer, I would say definitely affordability on payments, followed by logistics investments, which is something we're going to continue to invest in. I mean, we actually launched our future roadmap for Egypt for this year, and we're going to be upping our delivery stations to 26 across the country, just because we find it super important to be able to have that ready kind of structures so we can actually serve the customers at the speed that the customers are hoping for. So you couple that with the different types of payment options, I think that's where we start to evolve as an industry.
But is something like that driven by demand, or is it still a case that we're fixing a fragmented supply chain, for example?
So I think it's two-part. Yet another logical fallacy when companies assume that the metric or the SLA is anything but a self-fulfilling prophecy. How quick your customers want the shipment is how quick it needs to be. You look at the evolution, we probably started, 12, 15 days to get a product. Today you have same day shipping available. But then the question is it available till noon, or is it available till midnight? And what kind of investments that we need to make there? So I think it's a continuous thing that we have to continue to not only invest, but actually understand and learn from the other countries and from the other communities on how to kind of make it better. But it's definitely going to be something that's going to always be undergoing and kind of evolving over time.
Tell me, as a customer yourself, your first kind of experience of an online transaction.
First experience of an online, buying was awesome, selling was super hard.
Right.
Selling was hard because I think Arabic, and I tried to list it in Arabic, and this was 12 years ago.
What was it?
Which product? I think it was a phone. We used to sell used products back in the day, right. And it was a phone. And I tried to list it, but I wanted to do it in Arabic. I mean, we're serving Egypt, right? And it was super hard. And went back to the teams and we said, we're going to have to figure this out. And luckily enough, I think, seeing that early on has really, really helped us in terms of the evolution and the investments we've made there. I think we still have a very long journey ahead, but that was hard. On the buying, while I loved it, the part that I found frustrating is I bought it, I really, really wanted it at the same second. I wanted instant gratification. And back then, again, I mean, 12 or 15 years ago, you had to wait a bit.
Yeah.
We didn't have wake up in the morning, order, and by 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it's sitting on your doorstep. So that was the element that we had to kind of focus on getting. But there is that beauty of the convenience of placing an order on something and going off to the office, coming back, finding it just beautiful, sitting at that doorstep, and you get to open it like it's Christmas. So that's the part I do love.
Mm-hmm. So what lands are there left for Amazon to conquer in Egypt?
Well, I think it's contribute to, not conquer. Mm-hmm. But I think I don't think we've just begun. The beauty behind the transaction and Amazon launching in Egypt is not just about buying and selling. There's so many different things that Amazon provides. When you look at devices and the kind of work that does, when you look at Prime and the kind of convenience that comes behind that, when you look at video and how these things get launched out, gaming. I mean, there's so much that Amazon gives globally, and I think it's important for us to realize that there's so much that we can do to serve the communities that are in Egypt, but it's a question of making sure that you're doing it with the right standard that you could be proud of, something that you can delight customers for a long period of time at scale. Would we like to launch everything this morning? Absolutely. Would it be right 20 years from now when we look back on whether we should have tweaked the tech behind it to make it more localized for our communities here? I don't want to make that short-term decision, and we want to make sure we kind of deliver it at scale. So short answer is a lot. I mean, we still haven't even gotten started on.